James Street and East Bight, one of the character areas of Lincoln. It's an area at the top of the northern escarpment, directly to the north of the cathedral. Only two single-track roads run through it, East Bight and James Street. It's a very quiet part of the city. Close though it is to the castle and cathedral areas, it gives a feeling of seclusion, and since there are few entrance and exit points, and effectively no through roads, it's quite detached from the surrounding townscape. It has escaped many of the pressures and influences which shape the rest of the city, and much has remained unchanged since the Middle Ages. There's good reason for this. The area is located in what was one of the most fortified areas of the city. In Roman times, it occupied the northeast corner of the former Upper Roman city. Sections of the Roman city wall survive in two places here. One, in the northern stretch of East Bight, incorporates the remains of a Roman reservoir built against the wall. The other is to be found to the east, and you can still see it to the rear of the Lincoln Hotel. It's no accident that both these remnants are found alongside East Bight, which follows, more or less, the route of a street which was first laid down in Roman times, just inside the city wall. The reason for the road's sharp right-angle turn is that that's exactly what the wall did at this point. In the early 14th century, a defensive wall was constructed around the cathedral and its associated buildings, including several of those within the character area. The stone-built close wall, as it was known, still survives along the western and southern sides of East Bight. By the High Middle Ages, the mid-14th century, James Street had been laid out, providing access into this newly enclosed space. Land in this district was divided up into large gardens for properties almost all of which were associated with the cathedral. Meanwhile, land outside the close wall, that is the ground to the east and north of East Bight, remained undeveloped. The Bishop's House is the only one of these properties to have retained its original grounds. They still make up almost a third of the area. A map of 1842 shows it and the adjoining deanery as one large property called Atherton Place, with large formal gardens spreading away to south, east, and most of all north. Atherton Place also included what is now the Cathedral School boarding house, and the whole complex of buildings dates in fact from the late 13th century. From James Street, only the boarding house is visible. The other buildings are accessed through an archway, which has a picturesque timber-framed building over it. The boarding house is made of coursed rubble and brick, with plain tiled roofs and 4 chimney stacks, reflecting its former function as the lodge to the deanery. The deanery itself is built in coursed square stone and brick, with plain tile and pan-tile roof, but has in comparison more decorative detail. The Bishop's House, by contrast, is a timber frame building with brick and some decoration. North of the boarding house on James Street is the Burghush Chantry House, which dates from around the same period, as does Delorin Court, on the opposite side of James Street. Most of the old buildings in the area have tiled roofs, like the buildings mentioned before, and are constructed of stone, as brick wasn't a common building material back then. Notice how you can tell the older buildings in the area by the building materials they have in common. Although be careful. Take the stone building at number 5 East Bight, which is built into the close wall at the northern end of James Street. This house isn't as old as other stone-built examples. It dates probably from the early 19th century and is made out of a hodgepodge of stone materials, much of which were probably used in earlier buildings. In general, there was very little change in this whole area between the Middle Ages and the late Victorian period, when a couple of large houses were built, facing onto Eastgate. Number 1 James Street is a corner building with faces towards both James Street and Eastgate, and ambitions to match. A canted bay window facing Eastgate with parapet and iron crest, and a canted stone oriel window with conical roof above facing James Street. Much of the interior of the area remained almost untouched by time until the post-war period. Then began a process of infill, which involved breaking up some of the large garden plots. Typically, detached 1- and 2-storey houses were built in brick of various shades, which are positioned in the middle of large garden plots. Examples are numbers 1 to 4 Cottersford Place, which occupy the former gardens of a now demolished house of the 18th century. Such houses share some characteristics with their medieval neighbours. They too are concealed behind high boundary walls and fences. They too have generous gardens and driveways. All this adds to the sense of privacy and enclosure of this area, an impression which is increased by the overhanging trees and by the high walls and enclosures which keep the curious visitor outside these private areas. This video is one of a series exploring the sense of place of the many distinctive areas of the City of Lincoln. Explore the Heritage Connect website to find out more about this or other areas of the city. As well as many videos, you'll find a huge amount of further information there. But best of all, wherever you are, keep your eyes open for more clues to the city's fascinating history.